Hello and welcome everyone. We'll get started here momentarily. If you just want to hang out for just a minute. Hello, welcome. We're just waiting on a few more people and we will get started. All right, in about 30 seconds, we'll kick this off. All right, we will get started. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Leah Strevel. I am the events manager at Innova Payroll. Innova is a national employer solutions company headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee, with 11 offices throughout the U.S. Innova provides a full portfolio of payroll and HR services, including HR outsourcing and employer benefits. To learn more, visit innovapayroll.com. I am honored and excited to introduce today's speakers, Joe Schweppe and Diane Fry. Joe Schweppe began his professional career in the payroll and HR service industry with ADP, where he quickly rose through the ranks to major accounts area sales executive. In 2005, he decided the time was right to own his own payroll company and co-founded Integrated Payroll Services in St. Louis. As president of IPS, the company grew from a local startup to a regional provider with over 55 employees and over 1,500 clients. In late 2021, Joe and his business partner decided that merging with Innova Payroll offered their clients the best option for more services on a national basis, with the same boutique level of customer service. Today, Joe is president of Innova Payroll. Over the years, Joe has held several volunteer board positions with Entrepreneur Organization, which led him to be voted in as president of the St. Louis chapter in both 2014 and 2015. Currently, Joe serves as an advisory board member of the Triad Bank in St. Louis, Missouri. Diane Fry is a pre-sales engineer for Innova. Diane's prior work experience includes accounting roles and 20 plus years of HR and payroll experience. She is a member of the Society for Human Resource Management and holds the Certified Payroll Professional and Human Resources and SHRM CP certifications. For attending our 1 hour webinar today, you'll receive HR, CI, SHRM, and NASPA credit. You can expect to receive your certificate as well as the webinar recording early next week. The key objectives of this webinar are as follows. Explore the significant changes to payroll and HR since COVID and what is driving these changes. Learn how you can use the data you have in your payroll and HR system to provide your senior leadership team with more information for improved decision-making. Understand why people analytics has emerged at the center of HR today. Learn why people analytics is important to your organization and discover the 4 tips to get the most out of your people analytics initiative. Specifically, during today, our agenda is as follows. HR post-COVID, what is people analytics and why does it matter? Tips for maximizing your own people analytics initiatives, how you can apply these with your business, and then we'll be open to questions. If you do have any questions during this presentation, feel free to submit those to the Q&A widget at the bottom of the screen, and we will get to as many as possible, and whatever we can't get to, we are happy to follow up with you afterwards. So to get this webinar started, we are actually going to start with a poll question. So for you, how has your role in HR or payroll changed in the last 2 years? Let's see what you guys have to say. Has it stayed the same? Have you seen just some changes? Is it noticeably different or has it completely changed? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds here to get some of your answers. I'm sure nothing's changed for anyone, right? Nothing since 2019. We've all lived a very simple life since then. All right, we'll give it just a few more seconds for people to get their answers in here. All right. And as we notice, yeah, things have changed a little bit. Half of you said at least some changes. And then a good chunk says noticeably different. And then there are some who say your job is completely different. So that is a great transition for me to introduce Joe, our president at Nova, as he talks more about people analytics.
All right. Well, thank you, Leah. Appreciate that. And not surprising, although frankly, I thought it would be even higher on the drastically change, but certainly nobody voted stayed the same, which is somewhat shocking because it's really only been a little bit over 2 years since COVID. But I do think we all who answered that survey would agree that HR and payroll has drastically changed, since COVID became a new reality. We moved many employees from the office to working from home. We implemented systems that would allow us to keep employees engaged, such as employee self-service with mobile apps, which are found in most reputable human capital management solutions. We later found that there would be such a thing called the Great Resignation, but never dreamed that there would be a drought on applicants to fill those openings. So to me, that's been my experience of change. It's just completely different, and especially in the last 6 months, even more so than the last, even 2 years ago. So as we look, I think with all that being said, your role, all of those who are on this call that are HR professionals, your role is elevated in terms of corporate influence. So for starters, HR leaders are now at the forefront of their organization and responsible for keeping workforces engaged, productive, and resilient. HR has taken a front seat in critical workforce decision-making. And at this point, when our asset is our people, it's now more important than ever to maintain and retain those employees and develop those employees to increase their skill sets. So number two, there's a renewed focus on understanding workforce needs. In fact, the struggle to retain employees, fill job openings, and cope with the upward pressure on employee compensation has caused many business owners to turn to HR leaders for reliable measures to gauge how they're performing in those areas, prompting the need to invest in people analytics to help guide complex people-related decisions. And number three there, data-driven decisions with emphasis on people analytics. Using data to derive decisions is a big driver for why we see the trend in business investing in more in their people and people analytics. So we have to think, is your company behind the 8 ball in terms of comp and employee benefits? Then responding with urgency is critical. Reacting quickly and staying competitive with other employers is vital. HR analytics must be reviewed and acted upon promptly. Simply gathering data is not necessarily helpful, but it's how you use the data and what you do to implement potential change. Again, focusing in on what I see as the most critical change since COVID is this Great Resignation and drought on attracting new talent. So as we look at this and think what's really driving the change, we pretty much recapped a lot of it, but if you think about it, one major change that took place is this Great Resignation that we just talked about, in which millions of employees are leaving their current positions, causing numerous issues for HR leaders, including staff shortages and many vacant positions left unfilled. The factors that contribute to this include lack of flexibility, compensation gaps, undefined expectations for the teams currently employed, and weakness in maybe workplace culture. Another big change that has taken place in the workplace are talent shortages. U.S. labor statistics actually support this finding. It reports that current talent shortages amount to 40 million skilled workers and will continue to reach over 85 million by 2030. And if this trend continues, of course. No guarantee on that, and let's hope they're wrong. It has become increasingly difficult for businesses to find workers with the necessary skills and qualifications with such intense competition for talent. Between 2011 and 29, we expect about 3.5 million baby boomers are going to be at least at the age of retirement. We're not saying they're going to retire for sure, but they're going to get to that age of retirement. I mean, just think about that. That's over 10,000 people a day. So 3.5 million people are leaving the workforce. So why, while that number is somewhat fascinating or alarming, I might want to say, in terms of just how concentrated that generation was or is, there is something else to consider as more baby boomers start to retire. How will it impact your specific business, especially in technology and IT industries? There's also increased need for employee engagement retention. So if you think about it, that's a big thing that's caused a change. So when I look at that, I think employees are really demanding more in their careers: job security, professional development, and more opportunities for advancement. They also want to know that you care about them and their development, which requires the necessity to have a means to quickly and efficiently poll your staff with satisfaction surveys. We used to do those even back in prior to 2 or so years ago. We might do that once a year. Maybe it was, if we were really great, we might do a survey once every 6 months, and that's if we were really great. I think now's the time that it has to be more consistent and more precise. Short surveys, short questions, just get the pulse, a quick pulse of how your people are doing and what they think of you, maybe their management and the overall company. It's really more important than ever to have an HCM, a human capital management solution, or a human resource application that can quickly collect this data, because we're better to have that than in that system where you can store it, track it, and report on it for future. Another big factor that's driving this change is really technology. Technology is driving changes for HR professionals in general, but since the pandemic, I'm confident that that at least 80% of the attendees on this meeting right now have implemented technology to help them connect or stay connected with their employees. As discussed before, we have sophisticated human capital management solutions that give employees the information they need from one single solution and from their smartphone devices. So these are things that many HR professionals have implemented to stay connected, especially as they're starting to work more and more from home. And maybe many of you have brought people back or brought people back in a hybrid, but the difficulty and challenge has always been, how do we keep that connection? How do we keep our culture when people are working from home? A lot of HR professionals are really relying on technology to do those things. And then, of course, that leads into remote workforce. The top contributing factors to the shift in remote work include not having to commute, the flexibility to balance work and personal obligations, and perceived improved well-being. Let's face it, gas prices have more than doubled since the pandemic, and it's an added benefit to employees to not have to drive back and forth to work. If they have an hour or more commute, that's pretty big dollars that they're saving. All right, there we go. And with that remote work, it's no surprise here to see this slide. And I was kind of preface it by, if you don't believe me, then maybe you might believe Gallup. But according to a recent Gallup poll survey, 91% of workers will prefer to work from home, or at least partially from home. So as we look at that poll, very few people are actually saying, yeah, I want to go to work every day like I might have done before. They get used to that flexibility and personal well-being that it might offer them. Giving them an hour or two extra in their day, what is that doing for them in general? So I think that's what's here to stay, is some flexibility, maybe not 100%, but allowing that kind of compromise with what employees are really looking to gain. All right, and let's see here. And next, and when we look at the people analytics and defining what it really is, I have to kind of think historically what we were. HR leaders used to use HR data as a way to gather demographic information for their organization. Things like headcount, employee retention, turnover statistics, compensation changes, and job changes, and many more. But a lot of times we looked at that in report form, if that makes sense. We looked at it somewhat statically and said, okay, here's where we are. Maybe we should have looked at it, or maybe some of you looked at it in a way, well, here's where we were, here's where we are, here's where we want to be. So analytics allows us with some of that capability to do that, to be able to make those informed decisions. If I look at today, analytics is really at the forefront of HR. It's the process really of using employee data to make informed decisions that results in positive business outcomes. That's just the definition that we came up with. People analytics goes well beyond HR data. It looks at information from other departments such as finance, sales and marketing, engineering operations, and customer service to measure employee tenure, satisfaction, engagement, productivity, and ultimately revenue. So those are all the key data points. If you think of who's on this meeting right now in terms of HR professionals, we believe most of the attendees are. All of those items really fall under your responsibility and are found in a human capital management solution, with the exception of one, and that's revenue. However, there are ways to integrate revenue now with the advancement of APIs to integrate that in with HCMs as well.
All right, at this time, we're going to do another poll to follow up with Joe here. Is people analytics a top priority for your organization today? So we're curious, is this something that you guys use in your role to make decisions or to help you do your job better? Let's see what you have to say here. We'll give about 30 more seconds. All right. So it looks like about 60% of you said yes. There are a few who say no, and then some of you are unsure. So I think that's good information as we continue on to know what people analytics are and how to use those in your business.
All right, well, here's the answer. You saw the survey result. So you all believe 60%. Well, according to LinkedIn survey, 73% of HR professionals say that people analytics will remain a top priority for their organizations for the next 3 years. Obviously, I can't imagine it just being the next 3 years. I think it's going to be more like 90% of HR professionals will say that analytics will remain a top priority after even this short 3-year period in the future. You're all saying 60% is actually assuring and reassuring to me that it is important and you believe it's important. And what it will be able to do for your organization and your organization's ability to retain top talent and not have other competitors or just other businesses in general steal the talent that you have worked so hard to develop. But given the amount of information that we think is stored in an HR application, it's easy to see the value in identifying these trends. HR really, that's why we said at the forefront, HR is really at the roundtable now with high-level discussions on how can we move this company forward. You can't move many of these businesses that are on this call. I don't know any that can do it without employees, unless you outsource your whole employee organization. It's difficult to do anything without having good people to do it. So the pieces, in my opinion, that are missing from the core areas that we talked about before would be things like revenue. We have everything in an HR system that allows us to look at employee data, whether it be demographics, any type of demographic data, compensation data, benefit data, performance review data, the whole 9 time and labor data, overtime data, all of that is comprised in a human capital management solution, which means it's just there for the taking and analysis if you take the time to do it. So once I mentioned before, revenue was not part, but again, just to reiterate, if you really wanted good analytics with APIs as prevalent they are today, you can really get that data and bring that into a common source as well to have really, really, really good, strong data. All right, and so here, why is people analytics the ultimate superpower? There's probably many reasons you can think of, but LinkedIn's global recruiting trends of 2018 refer to data as the new corporate superpower. HR analytics is one of the most strategic ways HR can gain actionable insights into improved businesses. In fact, according to LinkedIn, 64% of recruiters and hiring managers use data at least sometimes on their, on top of that, 79% are likely to use data in the next 2 years. Data, though, on its own is only one point. It's really what you do with that data and how you measure that data, which we're going to find later, that makes the big difference. You can't just look at it once here or there. You've got to have a plan on how you're going to manage this data. In a recent survey by PwC found that the shortage of key skills is the biggest threat to businesses. HR professionals and C-levels are focused more on than ever on talent quality. And what they know, they definitely need to have the right people with the right skills to fill these jobs. We talked about the baby boomers that are retiring or potentially meeting that retirement age is a big threat because many of them are very loyal people as well. They've been in their positions for quite some time and didn't never think about leaving your organization. Times have changed. The younger generation is not necessarily, I'm not saying they're not loyal, but they're looking out for themselves and their happiness, which again is different. And I'm not discouraging that at all, but it is different than the generation of baby boomers that are retiring. So these skills, there's a lot of history that's been, invested, a lot of time, a lot of talent, a lot of knowledge with these folks that have been with us for quite some time, and we're replacing it and having a really drought on that skill and trying to find that. So that's a big challenge. So next. All right, so the key benefits of implementing a analytics program, if you will, would really be to tackle problems before they arise. If you think about this, how credible would it be if you were able to run a couple charts and graphs to show your current average compensation and how it compares to your industry or position? Would analytics provide you with the information you need to convince senior management to take action before you lose more people to the great resignation? And then next point would be make a confident decisions backed by data. A solid people analytics engine gives managers the information they need to confidently make decisions. For instance, instead of making educated guesses on what might be behind an ineffective recruitment process, you can use data to identify bottlenecks and issues earlier in the process. The third point here is improve company-wide performance. It might be hard to believe and fathom that you could, by using data analytics, especially as it focuses on HR data, how could that relate to the overall improved company-wide performance? Well, I think it's pretty easy to think about this. Imagine if you did a poll with your customers and tried to ask what your customers think of you. If that poll came back and that survey came back 5 out of 10, let's just say, for example, I wouldn't be surprised if we did an employee satisfaction survey that it would also come back a 5 or maybe even a 4 out of 10. It's no coincidence the two are linked. So if we have happier employees, we're going to have happier customers. Happier customers just also can help with happy employees. So all of those things are definitely intertwined, and data and a good system with the ability to do a quick surveys and track those surveys and progression of those is critical. So there is a basic recipe for people analytics, and there are key ingredients, and it really starts with data. Yeah, if you have good data, then it's everything. You can always get that data out, and how you get data out is through reporting. So now you have the data, now you have to report on the data. Well, then if you have data in a report, how great would it be to be able to get that into a graphical format in some type of an analytics, where you can present that to people that aren't necessarily as engaged as the folks that are on this call that know intimately well what the data really means. How do you present that to your peers, to your executive level, so that they can consume it? With that, I think it's going to be easier for us to come up with solutions, options, if you will, and then finally a decision to move a path forward, all coming from presentable data and analytics. So there are some tips that we are going to provide you with to maximize your people analytics initiatives. And the first starts with creating a people analytics strategy. Define what you will measure, establish what good looks like. Secondly, you want to clearly define the process. Who will be responsible? How is it measured, or how often is it measured? And then third, ensure compliance. Since we all know payroll HR systems have a lot of confidential data, we have to be very careful of what we're sharing with who we're sharing it with. So if we said, oh, here's a compensation survey and includes the executive salaries to lower level managers, that might not be a good thing. Just saying. So the next one would be to foster a culture of analytical decision making. Share the analytics that you're measuring with your management team and openly discuss observations that lead to data-driven decisions. So it's one thing, like I said before in the presentation, to say, I think we need to do this, is to say, let's look at these trends, look at this information. How could we not take action? It gives us much more confidence. All right, what we're going to do now is we're going to start and show you some of our live software. And we just thought it would be important, rather than just go through the boring PowerPoints, and I like to call them boring PowerPoints because I hate them too. But I thought it would be really helpful, and Diane thought it would be really helpful to get right into our technology and give you an idea what something like this could look like for your organization. How can we use an HR system to do the things that we just talked about? So I'm going to turn it over to Diane Fry right now to show you the engagement surveys. And she can talk about how critical would it be to get a pulse to find out how you're doing and how you're perceived. So Diane?
Thank you, Joe. And thank you everyone for your time today. Yes, measuring your employee satisfaction, as Joe stated earlier, we used to do it annually, but now it becomes more and more important as we look at our turnover rates and things like that. Why are we losing people? Are they satisfied? So having an HCM system that gives you that capability to actually create your own custom surveys, some of the questions that are going to be important to you. How likely are you to recommend a somebody to work for this company? How do you feel like your work gives you purpose? I understand my role, how it contributes to the company goals, and then other custom questions you may want to answer or ask your employees. And you can actually keep this anonymous. So when they actually give you their answers, you're not knowing who they're coming from, but it's also going to give you that that insight to how they feel about where they are. And of course, the charts and graphs are going to give you that answer. So for question one, how likely are you to recommend working at this company to a friend? We have some that agree, some that strongly agree, and I only actually polled 3 people, but it does give you shows you how they rate the company. And then does their work give them purpose? You have some that strongly disagree. So maybe I need to figure out what's going on with my population. And then of course, how does my role contribute to the company goals? Do I feel like I'm important to the company? I think that's another one that's important for employees. They want to feel like they're valued. I heard something the other day. It said something about employees would much rather have a new boss instead of having an increase in pay. So that's kind of an issue. Also, once you complete those surveys, you can get different answers, and you can do analytics to run different things. How does it look? So that you can give those C-suite people the answers they want. Why are we losing people? Why is our turnover high? And we can actually see that in the results by the surveys we're conducting. And your surveys can be done at different points in time. You can do them weekly, monthly, whenever you feel like that survey is necessary to catch the pulse of your population. And I will now turn it back to Joe.
Well, thank you. Having a difficult time unmuting myself, but thank you, Diane. That was great. And hopefully you all like that as well. So the next piece would be utilizing your payroll HR software for decision making. So we talked about surveys, but other stats that are housed inside an HR technology would be turnover data, accruals, maybe overtime, recruiting, and many more. Could be departmental costs, overtime costs, things of that sort. So all that data is going to be comprised inside a quality HR system. So there are, a summary of our key takeaways. We talked about this before, but if we look at this data, and we look at this data, we'll say that, there definitely are benefits to tackling problems before they arise. Knowing what your trends are looking like before we actually have a problem. The next one was obviously we talked about making confident decisions backed by data. And then finally, improving the company-wide performance. We talked about linking satisfactions of clients to satisfaction of employees, and things like what Diane just showed us could help us do that. So I'm going to take us into the technology real quick, so that you can get an idea of what we can also do with these other data points. And if you can go back one more slide, just to give a summary of that. There we go. The turnover and accrual. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll see how difficult of a time I have at that. Okay, I think we're in business, correct? Yes. All right, so as I look at this, and as I look at this screen, I can see some graphs and charts, some good data here. We can, number one, we see that we have some accruals data. So what am I looking at? I'm looking at a balance liability report. You know, it is showing me, let me enlarge that a bit. So what this is showing me is how much sick time do I have, hours remaining still today? How much vacation time do I still have today? Well, what does that mean to me? Does it mean if I'm close to the end of the year, that might mean a lot to me that nobody's taking enough, sick time or vacation time. They may need more time off. We also can look at reports such as the hours taken reports. So if I look at this data, and let me enlarge that for us a bit, I can see that in terms of hours taken, I've only had 312 hours taken so far. Well, that could be a real problem, that people are not taking their time. And that's kind of goes right into the previous graph and chart, that I had such a large balance of time off still. And this proves to me that nobody is taking enough time off. So we have to find out why. Is it because there's not enough people to assign the work to? They don't feel like they can get away? Those are things that are going to cause ultimate turnover if in fact people don't feel like they can ever take a break. So another metric could be, and this is where finance would come in, what's the overall value of the unused vacation time? How much will that cost our business? How much was the cost of unused sick time? In a graphical form, very consumable. The next area I'd like to show you would be the HR side. And what can we gain out of that? We can gain a lot in HR with turnover statistics. For example, if we look at my first graph and chart, I'm looking at pre-pandemic levels, and this is a time frame, it's a 2-year turnover period, to show me who we've lost and what their average tenure was. So how does that compare? If I take that, by the way, it's easy to consume when I look at it side by side with the post-COVID, my date range was 3/1/20 to 3/1/22. Now I'm looking at a little bit more turnover. What are we seeing? We're seeing more and more senior people leave and more people leave. So those are ways that we can look at data to say, we actually do have a problem. And if I look at this particular graph that I have, this analytics, I can see when I'm losing my people. What time of the month am I losing my people? I can see it's a close tie between February and March. If I want to look, well, how many people, it says 5.71% or to that degree or in that particular month, I can see we actually lost 4 people during that month. So the analytics has reports behind it that we can get to the data very, very easily to prove out what is in that chart or that graph. Taking it a little bit level below, I like to look at the seniority report to see where our peaks and valleys have been in terms of how many new hires have we brought on during when. And you can see, I bet you if this wasn't a demo account and was really our live account or your live account, you'd probably see a little bit of a strange occurrence in this particular area here of 21 to 22. In terms of EEO summaries, you'll notice here, I just have a nice summary in terms of EEO. How nice is it just to be able to see where we are in our initiative to diversify? All right, so if we take a look at payroll data, that's another good area that we can find some good analytics to help us drive some different decisions and such. I'm just going to start really with this labor distribution here. If I look at this particular graph, what am I seeing here? I'm reporting on overtime by department. So if all of a sudden, and obviously somebody on my team brought up that why would you have sales with overtime? Well, as you may or may not know, inside salespeople are eligible for overtime. So with that being said, it looks like sales is my predominant #1 overtime problem. So if I have this level of overtime and it's graphically coming out this much and this high, I might want to take a look at this and see what can we do? Are we not staffed accordingly? Why is this? Is it just we're just busy, or we want to work the overtime, or do we really need to work the overtime? So we have to think, is there a way, because over time, if I continue a trend like this, I guarantee I'm going to see a correlation of turnover potentially. Maybe not so much in sales, because hopefully if they're working overtime, they're actually making more commission. But if this happened in maybe an administration department like this here happened long term, I probably will experience some turnover if it is significant overtime that's expected week in and week out. Because as you know, the new generation wants more work-life balance. As we look here, we're looking at, just compensation. I'm just not even going to glare over that, but it's kind of nice to see all the gross pay versus net payment graphical form. I'm just going to skip that because that's not really too much of our conversation today. But I like this one because this one shows me what was last processing's payroll cost look like and what does it look like versus this one. I know it's probably difficult for you to see on screen here without me enlarging, but to get to the point across, I can see that support staff was more expensive this previous time than it was this time. Usually you see that trend increase the other way, but it's nice to see a graphical form to see what's your cost by department or business unit in a graphical form. Nice to be able to take this and print it out, bring it to a meeting, export the reports, what have you. Those are good things to see where you are in terms of your spend and where your true expenses are by cost centers. The next area that I'd like to hone in on would probably be benefits. Let's take a look at benefits real quick. And this is interesting because if you're like us, we offer both a PPO plan and an HSA option. Well, you might find if everybody is leaning towards the PPO and you're seeing much more participation in PPO than HSA, well, why is that? Is it communication? Do we have a gap on people understanding what an HSA is? Or is it that the HSA is just too high of a deductible? Or is it too expensive? Whatever the reason is, we have something as disparate as this, as different, we might need to look at that and say, are we effectively communicating our benefits to our people? These are just ways that we can help use data to look at results. Because I don't know that any one of us would have run a report and said, I have this many PPO, I have this many HSA, what am I going to do about it? When you look at things in a graphical chart, it's just more obvious. It's just more easier to consume and easier to look at trends. So that's a little bit about what I wanted. And by the way, as president of my company, even now, I'm president of the company that I co-founded for the last 17 years of my life. I used information like this. And by the way, we also did surveys to our employees. As I said before, I'll confess, I did not do surveys as often as we do now, but you have to do them more often now because of the Great Resignation that's occurring. So you'll notice there's many other tabs. We can, offer different drafts and charts, any of these tabs to be able to do that. But there's some good data too, just in terms of communicating with your employees. I like to look at these company hubs. How can you use a nice experience for employees? Maybe see a company image video that you have, or maybe, be able to allow employees to play those videos, or maybe you want to, advertise the fact that you have an employee referral program, or there's different websites that you're connected to within your organization. You want to give people an easy path. So these are just areas of a human capital management system that can make your communication process easier to your employees. And if employees are working more and more from home, it's an idea of how we can engage them better than we may do today. So kick it back to you, Leah.
All right, wonderful. All right, so at this time, we will see what questions we have. We welcome those questions. I know someone asked about the recording and the your certificate will be sent to you early next week. But pertaining to people analytics and providing value, does anybody have any questions? Joe, I do have a question. As people are, if someone were to switch to the Innova HCM platform, would all their data come over? Would that be able to provide those reports and analytics as well?
It depends on how far, and yes, everything is possible. Generally speaking, by default, we typically bring over the current year's data, but several organizations have asked us to bring over historical data as well. And when you say data, of course, we're going to bring over employee demographics, employees, all of their settings, their current settings. The history could look like, compensation history from years prior, and that definitely is something that can be imported.
Absolutely. And as your role as president, when people present these analytics to you, these reports, do you actually go into the platform itself? Do they send you PDFs? How does that work when they're sharing data with you?
When my directs share data with me, or when, I guess, can you rephrase that question?
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. Or even if you were going in and you have questions, I guess you would go in your system yourself. But if, your direct reports, if they're presenting, important data to you, how do they present that to you?
Yeah, so a lot of times, and I say this, I hope none of them are on this call right now, but I wish they were using the analytics because to me, it's the fact, right? I mean, there's no, hey, by the way, I think we need to hire somebody. Well, if you really looked at, we need to hire somebody because look at all the overtime we have. We need to hire somebody because we're burning these folks out and we need you to authorize another position or two. So those would be what I would hope for that would back up the decision. Because quite frankly, if somebody came to me like that, and as long as I could make the budget work, it's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. I know, I'm trying to remember Kathy, our growth development officer, the quote she always says about data. Kathy, I'm waiting for you to chime in.
If you're not measuring, measuring, you're not managing.
I love it. Thank you for that.
That's right.
I think it's a great quote. And I feel like that probably provides value to you too as you go to make decisions. It's right there in front of you. And so they've already come to you. They've already figured that out, just by analyzing that data. So it's great too, because if you have your own questions, you have access as well, to that same data if you want to go explore. Great. Are there any other questions? All right. There is information on here if you want to follow up with either Joe or Diane. I know that they both have a wealth of knowledge related to this platform, but also about just how to get this information and also the benefit of having it and sharing it. So you will receive your certificates in the recording for this beginning of next week. And like I said, if you guys have questions, please follow up with us. There will be a survey that pops up as you exit the Zoom screen. We would love your feedback going forward. And we do have another webinar opportunity already available for you guys to register for. So we're trying to this year, we really just want to be a provided asset to HR payroll professionals. And so our next one is actually with UKG, and we'll be looking at mega trends. And so that is on our website. If you go visit Innova, go over to resources and webinars, you can see any of the upcoming webinars. I encourage you guys to register for those. It's free credit, but also just really good information. So thank you for joining us today, and we hope to connect with you guys soon. Thank you, Joe and Diane.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.